Good wintry morning and welcome, one and all. If you are joining in person here in our historic sanctuary, we welcome you into the warm glow of this special place and the good company of your fellow seekers. If you are joining on Zoom from the warmth and comfort of home, we welcome you into the spirit of this community that transcends borders of time and space. It is good and right to be together. My name is Jennifer Johnson, and I have the honor and joy of serving as the lead minister here at First Parish in Concord. First Parish is a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and love is at the center of our faith. We covenant to grow together spiritually and ethically as we adapt to a changing world. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we embrace our differences and commonalities with love, openness, and respect. If you are visiting or newer to the congregation, we extend warm greetings. If you need assistance during the worship service, please see one of our ushers at the rear of the sanctuary. They can provide you with assisted listening devices and direct you to the restrooms, and if needed, the wiggle room downstairs, where young ones can play while the service live streams on a large screen. All ages are welcome to help yourself to soul work materials that are also at the rear, at the entrance to the sanctuary in the rear. These small crafts and coloring pages can help calm bodies and focus the mind. You are invited to join us immediately following the service for coffee hour in the parish hall downstairs, and a representative of our governing board will be available to answer your questions, and today that representative is the chair of our governing board, Gib Metcalf. If you prefer a more intimate space to reflect on the themes of the worship service, you are invited to join the Worship Reflection Circle in the Brooks Room. It's also immediately after worship. And a note about coffee hour this morning, we are returning to the red mug tradition that some of you will be familiar with. In the kitchen, you will see that there's a tray set with red mugs. Those red mugs are for newcomers. If you define yourself as a newcomer, those mugs are for you. If you wish, by pouring your coffee or water or hot drink into a red mug, you will signal that you are a newcomer who would invite being greeted by members of the community. Welcome. Once again, to gather in worship is a sacred act, and your presence among us is a blessing. We are glad and grateful that you are here. Please now rise in body or spirit to open our time of worship in song. Our opening hymn is "When Our Heart is in a Holy Place."
Is
Not to worry. We'll be returning to that tune later, so we're all good. When we tell our story from deep inside and we listen with a loving mind and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When we tell our story, what is our story as Unitarian Universalists? Some outsiders criticize our faith tradition for not having a story. In his novel, Radio Free Vermont, famed climate activist Bill McKibben, and good friend and partner of the UUs, voices this criticism through his character, Maria. Unitarians are probably the best people in the world. If there's a good thing going on in any community, chances are some Unitarians are doing it. But, Maria continues, most people aren't Unitarians because there's no story. There's no Jesus, there's no Moses, there's just doing the right thing. It's like their scripture is Bartlett's quotations and only the nice quotations. And for most people, that's not enough. There's no story. There's no story, and people want a story. People need a story. What do you think? It's not the first time I've heard that criticism. Is it valid? Well, I reject it. Unitarian Universalists are a people of diverse stories. We embrace the idea that a singular story is insufficient to satisfy the human intellect's quest for understanding and the human heart's capacity to love. Our Unitarian and Universalist traditions grew out of the Christian tradition that in turn grew out of the Jewish tradition. The stories of Jesus and Moses are our stories. We continue to mine them for truth and meaning. And like our transcendentalist ancestors who encountered the power of Eastern spiritual traditions, we also seek wisdom from the sacred stories of global religious traditions. Beyond Scripture, we turn to the stories that science tells us, and especially that grand cosmological story still veiled in mystery but coming into greater focus as our scientific understanding grows. Unitarian Universalists accept the truth that the world is forever changing, and that the stories we tell to give our lives meaning and purpose must continue to evolve and unfold alongside the changing conditions of reality. We are forever authoring the multifaceted epic of humanity. For me, the stories that are most central and most sacred to our faith are the personal stories that bind us together in spiritual community, our own stories and the stories of our faith companions, your stories and yours and yours and mine. The stories that unfold in joy and sorrow as we accompany one another through this strange business of life. Our stories are sacred and we need them all. From this pulpit, I've already shared many of my own stories, and when I offer them, my hope is that you will take hold of the threads from my stories, whatever threads speak to you, and that you will join those threads with many others that you have gathered and weave them into the stories that give your life meaning and purpose. Even though I'm a preacher and I get to tell my stories from this pulpit nearly every week, there's nothing especially sacred about my stories. All of our stories are sacred. All are needed to weave the great invisible tapestry of the human experience. All are part of the grand human epic that we are singing across the generations, from ancient times unto eternity. We need all of our stories. So later this morning, you will hear stories from some of our faith companions right here in our spiritual community, First Parish in Concord, from Jim Reynolds, Dana Lissy, Leah Russell, and Jane Blumberg. Their stories give color, texture, and music to our mission to deepen spiritually, to build community, and to make a positive difference in the world. May the threads of their stories inspire your own weaving. May the notes of their songs strike a chord with your own. Together, let us weave the story of this time and place. Let us sing the epic poem of our precious lives. Come, let us worship. And in our Unitarian Universalist tradition, when we gather to worship, we kindle a flaming chalice, the symbol of our faith, a beacon of love and justice in a beautiful and broken world. As I light the chalice, please join in our unison chalice lighting words for the month. They will appear on the screen.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Amy Friedman. I serve as your Minister of Religious Education, and as Jennifer so beautifully explored already this morning, story is the theme for the month, and we join with other Unitarian Universalist congregations in exploring soul matters, which offers us religious education and stories and small group sessions, all related to this theme, which you will explore further in the service. So this morning, I am about to share a story called The Storyteller. All right? And it comes from that wonderful soul work packet. And as many stories begin, this one begins, once upon a time, long, long ago. In a small village lived an old woman who was a storyteller. No one seemed to know where she came from, but it didn't matter because everyone loved her, and she always had a story to share. Sometimes it was a story of joy, sorrow, tribulation, triumph, but whatever it was, it spoke to the need of the person who approached her. For each night, she would light a big fire, and one after one, villagers would approach her and ask her to tell a story, and it always seemed to be the perfect one. And sometimes the villagers seemed so grateful, they would say, "But what can we give to you?" And she would always say the same thing. "You can tell me a story from your life." Oh, but the villagers weren't sure about that idea. They often just left a little homemade gift and went on their way. They were a little uncertain about sharing from their own life, worried that they might be humiliated or ridiculed or judged, and so they went on their way. One night, the storyteller lit her fire, and along came a young man who had experienced a great loss. His face was marked with tears, and he said, "Please, tell me a story that will bring me some peace." The storyteller, with a gentle smile, replied, "The most powerful stories are not the ones that we hear, but the ones that we tell. Your story, though heavy, holds the key to your healing." And so hesitantly, that young man began to share his tale of loss, and his voice trembled with emotion. And as he spoke, the storyteller listened, nodding, her eyes full of understanding. And as villagers passed by her fire, they stopped and they came and they sat and they listened to that young man's tale. And they came one and another and another. And when he finished, the storyteller shared her own story, a tale of a young girl who had also had loss in her life but found strength in sharing her grief with others. And as she finished, other villagers shared their stories, and then another and another and another. And the night went on with that fire burning bright, and they began to realize that their pain was not unique. They could offer comfort and support to one another. The next morning, the storyteller was gone. And she left a note. It said, "You don't need me anymore, for you have each other. And together you have more stories than you will ever need if you remember to share them." And so from that day on, the villagers would take turns. They would light the fire, and they would gather around, and they would share their stories with one another, listening and sharing and taking time to process joy, sorrow, triumph, and loss. Now, I, of course, thinking about this wonderful place and all of you, thought, what if the chalice is our fire that we gather around all the time, both here in our worship service, but also in our RE classrooms, our small group gatherings, and even before we head out into the world in service. Together, we share our unique stories, as Jennifer said so beautifully. I want to invite each and every one of you to another opportunity that's coming up very soon. It's happening on Thursday, January 30th. It's called True Story Theater. It's an opportunity for you to share a story, and then their troupe of actors and musicians actually play back the story to you in a very wonderful, transformative, healing way. And if you have more questions about that, I'm happy to talk to you more about it. I hope you will come experience it, and I know that Lee and others will be in the coffee hour to explain more about that process to you. I hope that more and more it will become part of who we are as a religious community. Today we have three classes for children. One is Little RE, which is happening right now downstairs in the space, the Milldam Nursery School. So if you have preschoolers, you can bring them down there. We have Junior Youth Group, which is led today by Dawn Van Patten and Kelly, and I'm leading the kindergarten through 5th grade group with Leah. And if you'd all come forward, and we will exit through this door, and if you would join together in song.
Each Sunday, we set aside time in our worship for a ritual of empathy when we bear witness to the most meaningful passages in our life and feel together in joy and sorrow, grief and hope. In this way, we deepen the wellspring of compassion in our hearts that we may meet each other and those in our wider world in a spirit of love and care. On this Sunday, we especially hold in prayer Paula and Woody Vandiver. Woody was hospitalized for pneumonia this week and will be going to rehab when discharged. We hold in our deepest prayers all who are impacted by the urban fires raging in Southern California, the victims and the survivors, their grieving and worried friends and family members, the displaced and the frightened, the fire and emergency response teams on the front lines, and all who worry for their well-being. Into this space made meaningful by our presence, I invite each and all of you to share the names and sacred concerns that you are holding today, either by typing them into the chat if you are on Zoom, or by saying them quietly aloud in the space you are in. Let us join together in a moment of silence to acknowledge and hold in our hearts all the intentions and prayers spoken and unspoken among us. As the poet William Blake put it, the joy and woe that is woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. So we will take a moment of silence, and I will invite us out of our silence with words of prayer from the Reverend Bob Janice Dillon, and we'll move from the prayer into our sung response. Eternal Spirit of life and love, gracious God, we come together in your presence today, grateful to be part of the great story. What a magnificent story it is. Into this great story, into this tapestry of natural beauty and human endeavor, we can weave in threads of good deeds. Help us, O Spirit, to move this story along and to jolt it every day towards love. Amen. Each month, we share our plate collection with organizations who share our faith values and are nominated by members of our community who are committed volunteers of those organizations. For the month of January, the beneficiary of our collection is Massachusetts Afghan Alliance, and Regina Correo of our Immigration Justice Task Force is going to tell you about their mission.
Good morning. In August 2021, with the Taliban takeover, many Afghan allies who were part of the U.S. effort there were left behind. Leaving behind the drivers, translators, security forces, and service members that had worked alongside our soldiers was deeply troubling for them. I know this from having talked to a few, including my godson, Danny. Part of healing for them, as I heard them describe it, is providing support and resources for Afghan refugees. It's a way that they feel they can make things at least a little bit whole again. In Massachusetts, John Moses, who many of you heard last Sunday, formed the Mass Afghan Alliance, a new 501c3, as one way to help. Take our friend Cameron. Talk about storytelling. Cameron arrived in Massachusetts 1 month ago, just about 1 month ago today. And that was 3 years after being separated from his wife, Taiba, at the Kabul airport in the evacuation. Taiba's name may be familiar to some of you because we and our friends at Kareem Shalom helped her in her resettlement, along with her sister Razia. The Mass Afghan Alliance has committed to supporting Cameron with his orientation and resettlement. There'll be resources for him for community, housing, healthcare, and education. They provide mentorship and material goods. Cameron is just one of the many refugees that they support. They provide welcoming spaces, community, share meals, participate in cultural activities, try to help these new refugees, our new neighbors, feel welcomed at home and supported. They help them prosper with dignity and joy. We wish that for Cameron and for all the refugees that this new and brilliant organization supports. Please give generously.
It's my belief that the primary purpose of religion is to help us find meaning and purpose, what I sometimes call orientation, in what the poet Mary Oliver calls this wild and precious life. One of the primary ways we human beings find meaning and purpose in life is by shaping our experiences into stories and sharing them with each other. To tell our stories from deep inside is a religious act, and to hear them with a loving mind is to receive a sacred offering. So I invite you to hold the stories you are about to hear and receive with a reverent spirit. To help us do that, we are going to perform a ritual. We are going to offer a blessing to each of the storytellers by remaining seated and singing the second verse from our opening hymn, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place, a sung blessing, if you will. And we will begin by offering our blessing to our first storyteller, Jim Reynolds.
Parish in 1997 in a lot of pain. I have a psyche that is set to feel constant shame. Stress gripped me, and I self-medicated by drinking too much. Pain causes a natural self-centeredness. I was not a happy fellow, and I had a paucity of gratitude. But I had just read Henri Nouwen's book, Life of the Beloved, Spiritual Living in a Secular World, and it reawakened in me a desire to understand myself in this wider universe, so I ventured here. In those days, during a child dedication service, our minister, Gary Smith, would address the child with these words: "In this place, you will learn to count the number of your days and to weigh their meaning, to gather into your mind the wisdom of your ancestors, to learn why we call one thing right and another wrong, and to treasure beauty, mercy, and justice in the deepest places of your being, to count the number of your days and to weigh their meaning." For nearly 30 years, I have done that here, and my spirit has deepened for that process. Here are some highlights. I immediately joined our social action community, and I found joy in service. I found that service truly transformed my anxiety into abundance, and the mundane became miraculous. I did not understand how it happened, but in those moments, it wasn't even clear to me who was serving and being served. We were all just here. Wherever here was, we were here together. And in those holy moments, my pain dropped away. And I felt a nascent gratitude. My isolation thawed more when I found the joy of community and music. Oh, my Lord. Music, first with Rise Up Singing, and then later in the choir. I may be the flattest singer in our choir, but I am among our most enthusiastic. There's a photo of a group of us from Rise Up Singing on the lawn at Concord Library. That's it, at the Concord Library. It's in the summer of 2009, and we are listening to a concert by folk singer and Rise Up Singing favorite Bill Staines. And I remember approaching the group that night And I realized I was welcome, and my isolation thawed even more. Following a spiritual path, what Gary called the wisdom of our ancestors, has brought me to gratitude. I follow the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I hasten to add that self-centeredness is not confined to alcoholics. All of us profit from following paths laid out by those who came before us. Those paths lead to awakening, and beyond awakening, gratitude waits. In this place, I've allowed myself to be loved. In 2013, my 25-year marriage ended. I was struggling, and I thought I was struggling alone, but my friends and community arrived in my life unexpected and unbidden, and I was carried by your love. And I came to realize that I had been loved in ways that I didn't understand. Knowing myself as loved was unfamiliar to me. And when later I arrived with a new partner, knowing that you would welcome her and hoping that she would love you as I did, it went so well that after several months, I got a great boost from my humility when a friend said, listen, don't mess it up, because if this one goes south, we're keeping her. Finally, like many of you, I have been blessed by the intimacy that is fostered by many of the small groups that form here. I'm part of a group of men who meet monthly for breakfast, and in our last meeting, one of the members read a letter from his sister that she had written shortly before she died of cancer at a young age. And I felt again that sense that time had fallen away, that this sacred, essential moment now was all that mattered. I arrived here nearly 30 years ago, and if I could speak now to, as Gary did, to those children, and if I could address the younger man I was at that time, filled with shame and stress, I would say, in this place, you will count more than 10,000 days and weigh their meaning, and you will come to see that your life is a blessing. It is a gift. It will not always be the gift you would have chosen for yourself, but it is a gift nonetheless. And you will come to treasure that gift. You will delight in it, you will love it, and you will be grateful for it, and you will not resent any longer the gift you were not given. You will not envy the gifts given others. And when that day has come, you will stand in this pulpit and address this community that you have loved and that has loved you. And you will say, we are here together in this holy moment. Let us give thanks and be grateful for the winding road that has brought us to this place.
Dana and I would like to share with you some reflections on our trip to Transylvania in September of 2023. It was a very powerful trip for both of us, I know. Dana, what initially made you decide to go on the trip?
My initial reasons for going on the trip were fairly straightforward. I wanted to scratch my itch for traveling outside of the United States. This was shortly after COVID, and learn about a new culture, but more importantly, to learn more about our Unitarian roots. What about you?
As you know, I was born and raised in the Unitarian tradition in Winchester, and my father played a major role in establishing their partnership with the church in Parish, Transylvania. And Dad's passion and enthusiasm for this whole connection was absolutely contagious. And it didn't take long before the discussion about all the activities and happenings between the two churches sort of became standard fare for my family conversations and dinners. My mom even taught herself Hungarian at age 74. Which was pretty amazing. But when the opportunity arose to visit Székely Keresztúr, I just knew I had to go. I wanted to learn more about what my parents had shared with us. I wanted to learn more about our Unitarian connection to Transylvania. And in a way, I wanted to honor my dad through my own journey. So it was really important that I go. What are some lasting impressions for you from the trip?
Well, there are many, but to keep it relatively short, one thing that I just visualize over and over is how beautiful the landscape is there. The countryside is wonderful, and there's just an abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables everywhere you go. And the people incorporate this into their diet every single day. These fruits and vegetables are on their plates and on their meals every day. It's very healthy. Because of that, Transylvanians seem much more in touch with the land than we are here, and it's really nice to see that connection to the earth. And this spoke to me because I love being outdoors, and we did lots of hiking through, over lovely hills and fields and groves of fruit trees, and there were flocks of sheep passing by, and it was just all as a group. It was very fun and exhilarating. What about you?
I agree. The people are definitely much closer to the land, which is quite a contrast to how we live here. But they were also incredibly welcoming. I certainly did not expect to be the recipient of such radical hospitality, a term that I heard before I went, but it's just like nothing you've ever experienced before. I felt warmth and love and kindness from people I had never met before, yet somehow I'm connected to. And honestly, there was more than one time during that trip where I felt my eyes well with tears just at this love from this group of people. We built bonds throughout 2 weeks through, we didn't all speak the same language, but through music and food and dance and worship, we made these really tight connections. And I remain completely awed a year and a half later that 7 time zones away, there is a community of people who love us for who we are because of our shared, kinship through our mutual beliefs. It's quite powerful. And I know the trip was really memorable and moving for you as well. What is one thing that has settled with you deeply for the trip?
Yes, well, first of all, I agree with everything you just said about the radical hospitality. The people are wonderful. But for me, the deepest impact from the trip came out of learning more about the history and theological roots of Unitarianism. It compelled me to start examining my relationship to God and religion in a way that I had not before. As a lapsed Catholic, I've struggled with this. I also didn't really realize how radical Unitarianism was vis-a-vis belief in the Trinity. To see how our Transylvanian partners so comfortably embrace their faith despite being in the minority in the country that they live in was very moving to me. And that's what really got me thinking more intentionally about what I believe and what God means to me and why I am a UU. I came away with a deeper connection to our church, even though I don't consider myself very churchy. I never have. And with a spiritual connection to radical people who live halfway around the world. This moved me tremendously. What about you, Leah?
Like you, I found my connection to my UU faith deepened, which was a real surprise for me. Growing up Unitarian, I feel like it's coursing through my veins and can't get much deeper than that, but it really did. It really settled in much more deeply. There is something magical and transformative about spending time in the birthplace of Unitarianism, and to really learn that, you know, our religion goes back centuries and has this deep history. Bonding with our Unitarian siblings in Transylvania just made our religion feel deeper and more powerful for me somehow. And through that deeper connection with our friends and with my faith, I've found myself sort of closer to a Unitarian version of the holy, if that makes sense. You know, I've been blessed to have many wonderful travels over the years, and I've taken trips that have been about history and culture and being outdoors and spending time with community. And this trip gave me all those gifts, but it also truly touched my heart and my soul through the community that we built over those few weeks there. So I'd have to say, for me, it was a life-changing trip.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. I wasn't really quite expecting that at the outset, but it really was powerful and unique. And it will stick with me for the rest of my life. I do believe that. And I know that we are very thankful for everyone who helped make it possible, and to our fellow travelers. We truly were companions on this journey, and I do believe we built our own community and extended our community with our Transylvanian partners. Thank you.
Good morning. For me, making a positive difference in the world speaks of activism, doing something outside the realm of family or work. This can require resisting the gravitational pull to stay with what's safe and familiar. And the story I want to share is an example of this. Most of you know that our Immigration Justice Task Force, along with devoted volunteers from outside First Parish, has supported the extended Hakimi family in Lowell for 3 years. It's been a labor-intensive project, as it is an extended family of 12 from Afghanistan with different cultural norms, no English or formal education, and many health issues. The story I want to share is about Astoris's, Mrs. Hakimi's nephew, Sahil, who came with the Hakimis in 2021 when he was just 16. He's given me permission to share this story with you, of course. Let me just say that Sahil and I bonded the first week over demonstrating to the larger family how to provide urine samples. Sahil arrived here without his parents or siblings. Just take a moment to think about arriving in Lowell High School with 4,000 other students, only a couple of words of English, and no parental support. One Friday afternoon, a year after he arrived, I received an urgent call from the high school while I was out in my yard raking. Sahil had made some comments to a teacher that, according to protocol, required him to be sent immediately for a psychological assessment. They were calling for an ambulance to take him to Lowell General. What? What could he have said? I sort of knew Sahil at this point. The school agreed to wait until I could get there and pick Sahil up if I promised to have him evaluated. Now here I must pause to give you a little context. Just 2 weeks before this, Sahil's cousin, one of the Hakimi's daughters, had suffered a mental health crisis that resulted in a week-long stay on the psych floor of the ER at Lowell General, the very place where the school was now planning to send Sahil. In every way possible, this had been a nightmare for the family, for us, and especially for this teenage girl, and it had not resulted in any treatment whatsoever. Although I had consulted with others on our team, I was the one who had brought her into the hospital, and so the fear that this would destroy the family's trust in us weighed very heavily on me. We could not bring Sahil into that situation. So, back to Sahil. I raced up Route 3. My pickup truck was full of leaves, which were now cascading out of the back, and I noticed the man behind me had his windshield wipers on. And en route, I called Rachel Wheeler, the doctor on our team. She said, keep him out of the ER. I will find a place where we can have an assessment done. It may take a while. At the high school, I was brought into a conference room, and there was Sahil and a gym teacher. Sahil explained that he had told a teacher he'd heard voices the previous few nights as he was drifting off to sleep. This raised red flags. But what were the voices? People in the apartment next door? His adolescent brain responding to the stress he was experiencing? He said, sometimes I just want to be able to pray at school, he told us. The burly gym teacher leaned closer and invited Sahil to use a corner of his office anytime for prayer. Bring your Quran, bring your prayer mat. If you ever need to be excused from a class, we will make it happen. Sahil was released into my care. Rachel had managed to get an appointment for later in the day. What do you want to do in the meantime? I asked. I want to go to the halal market. It smells like home. I want to go to the mosque and pray. And so this is what we did. The psych assessment that evening suggested he was not a danger to himself or others. We now had the magic piece of paper clearing him to return to school. We went back to his apartment, and this is where the real magic happened. Sahil called his mother in Afghanistan. He explained what had happened. He could hear his mother beginning to walk. Stay on the phone with me, she said. I will take you to the imam. And Sahil, from his dingy Lowell apartment, heard the sounds of his Kabul neighborhood and his mother's steps as she walked him to the mosque. The imam was found, and he spoke quietly with Sahil and asked him all about his experiences. He then prescribed the relevant passages from the Quran, which Sahil wrote down and kept in his pocket in the coming days and weeks. So how was it that a gym teacher at Lowell High and an imam in war-torn Afghanistan were brought together on that Friday afternoon? I think the protagonist in this story is love. Love was present in every connection that afternoon, even between a teacher and a student he didn't know. Last Sunday, Jennifer shared M. Scott Peck's definition of love, and I think it speaks to this story. Here it is. Love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. I believe going out in the world to make a positive difference, or to quote from the Quran, to do good, indeed Allah loves the doers of good, is most effective and most rewarding when it is fueled by love. M. Scott Peck continues, love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. Will also implies choice. We do not have to love. We choose to love. I don't know if you can put that picture back up of Sahil and his mom, but here's an epilogue. Sahil graduated from Lowell High this past June, thanks in large part to Suzanne Knight, keeping after him. His parents have been able to join him here because he arrived as an underage refugee. So they live together in a really nice apartment in Lowell. He's working full-time at a restaurant, and in fact, running it now while the owner is out of the country for a few weeks. His English is really very good. He has received his asylum, and he has heard no more voices.
have to throw out my script after that. Doesn't work anymore. Wow. Wow. Let's just feel that for a little bit longer. Thank you, storytellers. Thank you, listeners and blessers of the stories. Thank you, musicians, for your voices. I feel like I can see and touch the tapestry that we've been weaving together this morning. It's so exquisite. And your stories are part of it too. Whether they've been spoken or not on this day, you bring them here, you share them with each other, you will continue to share them, and we will keep weaving them into this beautiful clothing for all of our souls to mind us through our lives. Let's keep telling, let's keep sharing, let's keep drawing that circle wide. May it be so. Please rise in body or spirit and join in our closing hymn, Where My Free Spirit Onward Leads. That's a new one for me. Lovely. We will bring our time of worship to close in the traditional way of this congregation by giving and receiving our words of benediction. Go out into the world in peace, have courage, hold on to what is good, return to no person evil for evil, strengthen the faint-hearted, support the weak, help the suffering, honor all beings. May be seated to enjoy the postlude.